What's up, everyone? Mike Wellman here for TYTSports. Be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at MikeWellman88 and check out my YouTube channel, The MMA Word. And we interrupt your regularly scheduled UFC coverage to bring you some Bellator news. Bellator, the second biggest MMA promotion going right now behind the UFC, had only their second ever pay-per-view event on Saturday night. They were back on pay-per-view. They had their biggest card to date. It was sort of the closest thing you would ever see from Bellator to a stacked UFC card, meaning that it features pretty relevant fighters overall. So, a lot went on Saturday. Like I said, it was their biggest card ever. It was at Madison Square Garden. They hired former UFC announcer Mike Goldberg. They hired, Mauro Ranallo, who, what can you even say about Mauro at this point? He's just the best combat sports announcer of our generation. He was on the call for the pay-per-view, but let's not waste any time. Let's get right into all the chaos that was Bellator NYC and Bellator 180. In the main event, Chael Sonnen defeated Wanderlei Silva by unanimous decision. One judge gave him a 30-26 score. Two judges gave him 30-27. So the story here was Chael out-grappling Wanderlei pretty much the entire fight. To be honest, I didn't know what to expect from either one of these guys. Wanderlei hasn't fought since his UFC fight against Brian Stann about 4 years ago. And Chael has looked, night and day different than the Chael Sonnen who earned all those title shots in the UFC. He just looked like a shell of his former self in recent years. His last fight was to Tito Ortiz, where he lost in embarrassing fashion against Tito. So, in this fight, it was all Chael. Took Wanderlei down, outpointed him, outgrappled him, used those pitter-patter punches, stayed active the entire fight. Wanderlei had a few brief moments in the fight. He dropped Chael once in the first round, dropped him again in the second, but he couldn't really capitalize. He couldn't really follow up with a big exchange to put Chael away. Chael was just dead set on closing that distance, getting the takedown, and keeping Wanderlei on his back for the full fight. And that's pretty much what happened here. It was good to see Chael still has something left in the tank, because I know he's definitely still marketable in MMA, especially in the money fight era that we're in, where you can't really get people to watch your fight unless you are extremely vocal beforehand in interviews and memorable in interviews and things like that. So the fact that we can still see more out of Chael is probably a good thing for Bellator. I don't know what's going to happen next for either of these guys. Chael called out Fedor and Rory McDonald afterwards. So that should tell you that for Chael Sonnen right now, there really aren't a ton of options in Bellator. He's a middleweight calling out a heavyweight and a welterweight, which just, like I said, that should tell you how many options there are for Sonnen right now. Ortiz retired. So Tito Ortiz, speaking of Tito Ortiz was outside of the cage for the main event at Madison Square Garden, and he was heckling and insulting Chael Sonnen so much. I tweeted out that he reminded me of like a heel wrestling manager trying to interfere in the match. And Tito became such a spectacle cage side on Saturday night that during the Silva versus Sonnen fight, the crowd in New York City was chanting "F you Tito" and "Tito sucks." So, but nonetheless, Tito is retired, so he wasn't exactly building a future matchup with Sonnen there. There's just really no guys left like Wanderlei, like Chael, like Tito for Chael Sonnen to face, right? He's got to call out Fedor, who we're going to get to in a second. Who knows what's the future holds for Fedor after Madison Square Garden. But, Kimbo Slice passed away. He's no longer with us. Rest in peace, Kimbo. Bellator's not really doing the freak show fights with guys like Dada 5000 or Ken Shamrock. Kurt Angle talked about going to Bellator at one point. I think they're just really shying away from, like I said, the freak show fights. So it seems like Chael's going to take on some actual, ranked competitors in Bellator here. So I could see him fighting Ryan Bader, who we're also going to talk about here, for the Bellator light heavyweight title. Bader won that title at Bellator 180. Fedor is an option, which is, I don't know if that would be more of a spectacle fight than compelling matchup at this stage, but like I said, not a lot of options for Chael, and for Wanderlei, who knows if he even fights again after a match like that. Just the fact that he showed up was impressive to me. I know they had Randy Couture on standby in case there was any shenanigans with Wanderlei, who's not really the most reliable fighter, to keep it simple. But Nonetheless, I mean, maybe you feed Chael Sonnen to Liam McGeary, former Bellator champion. Maybe you build McGeary back up as a title contender, have him beat a guy like Chael Sonnen to get a title shot here. I mean, and then, of course, at the end of the fight, Wanderlei gave Chael a nice, unsportsmanlike shove during Chael's post-fight interview. Obviously, no burying of the hatchet there. The bad blood remains with these two. Disappointing performance from Wanderlei. But like I said, just the fact that Wanderlei showed up and fought under the auspices of an actual athletic commission says a lot. So, credit to Bellator for actually getting this fight in the cage that the UFC couldn't get when these two coached The Ultimate Fighter all those years ago. All right, so in the co-main event of Bellator NYC. So the actual co-main event ended up being a swing bout between Neiman Gracie and Dave Marfone. This one got bumped up from the prelims. Bellator does that kind of stuff. If they run out of time on the prelims, they will wait till after the show and then put on a prelim fight after everybody's gone. This time they snuck it in there right before the main event. But in the advertised co-main event, in the double main event, as they were calling it, former UFC fighter Matt Mitrione knocked out the legendary Fedor Emelianenko ice cold in the first round. We saw the uncommon double knockdown in this fight. So right in the first round, both guys land a punch on each other at the exact same time. Both of their butts hit the mat. Mitrione recovers quicker, jumped on Fedor with those big meathead fists. And, I mean, it was like a bomb went off in there. They each hit each other at the same time. Boom, double knockdown. And in that split second, they both hit the mat. We didn't know who was hurt worse. I mean, even in that split second, I thought, did these guys seriously just knock each other out? It all happened so fast, but nonetheless, Mitrione gets the knockout here, as most people thought he would. Fedor is really on the decline, on the last legs of his career. I mean, BJ Penn also fought this weekend, and it just makes you ask the question, when are these guys, these legends of a bygone era, finally going to stop fighting? What's it going to take for these guys to finally stop fighting? The sad thing is that it usually takes, you know, a pile-up of devastating losses, and it shouldn't get to that point. But that's what we're seeing here with Fedor. You know, he was undefeated for 10 years in Pride, comes over to America in Strikeforce a few years ago, goes on a 3-fight losing streak, retires, goes back to Russia, wins a few, you know, shenanigan-filled contests, and here he is in Bellator getting knocked out by Mitrione. Fedor said after the fight that he wants a rematch with Mitrione. I can see them booking that one for sure. Mitrione's another guy that they don't really have a lot of options for. I mean, they had Fedor. They tried to book that fight, finally got it here at Bellator NYC. They could run it back, get some ratings on TV, but I don't necessarily think we need to see that one again. Like I said, most people thought Mitrione was going to go in there and knock Fedor out, and that's what we saw. So did some weird stuff happen? Yes, but this is MMA. This is why we watch. Overall, I thought Bellator's pay-per-view card was at least on par with a lot of the UFC cards that we've been seeing lately. So props to Bellator. They've come a long way. They can get kind of right up next to the UFC as far as the competition that they're putting on in the cage. So I thought we should do a Bellator video here to keep you guys updated, because there is some stuff going on in MMA outside the UFC. But what do you guys think? Did you watch Bellator? Do you ever watch Bellator? Do you think that once a fighter leaves the UFC, they're sort of off the radar? Let me know in the comments section below. Be sure to subscribe to TYTSports. Like I said, my name is Mike Wellman. You can give me a follow at Mike Wellman 88.